I'm going to give you that, continue to give you that best effort. And that's what we should be striving for, best effort. There are two different ways to look at coaching and success. Coach Wooden spent 50 years trying to, solidify his pyramid of success and redefining success. And we got to redefine winning a little bit too. It can't be all about the scoreboard, because if it is, half the kids are going to leave disappointed, right? It can't be all about results and performance, because more than half the kids are going to leave thinking that they didn't do a good job, right? Because some of the kids are going to win and not play well, right? So they're going to think that they didn't put in a decent enough day. So we want to reward that effort as much as we can. And what that's going to do is that's going to develop a growth mindset in young kids. Has anybody read the book Mindset by Carol Dweck? Right? It's a really short, easy read, and it's great for coaches, parents, teachers. It's Mindset by Carol Dweck. She's a professor at Stanford, and she's on the advisory board for Positive Coaching Alliance, which I've spoke for 6 years or so. But basically, you need to reward them on the process instead of the result. And get this across to your kids' parents as well, especially on that parents, because they're really going to praise their kid and tell them how good they are, right? And a lot of times what that does is this. If I continue to tell Blaine that, you're such a good shooter, Blaine, right? You're doing great, you're so good, you're so wonderful, he's going to think that he's successful because he's good. And at some point in time, when he faces somebody that's just as good and things start to get a little bit tough, he's going to think, well, I'm not that good. And he's going to hit that plateau. But if I continue to tell him you're shooting so well because you're really working on your form and you're really putting in the hours and you're really listening to Coach Pete or whatever, right? Then he's going to think he's good because he puts in the work. So when he reaches that tough guy, right, where it's kind of difficult, he knows that all I got to do is go back in and put in more work, right? And if I go back in and put in more work, now I'm going to get better and I'm going to break through that plateau and continue to improve, okay? And that's a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset where I'm good because I'm talented and that's what, mom and dad and girlfriend and my friends tell me, right? So we want to make sure that we're praising them for the process instead of for the final result. And then they're going to screw up, they're going to make mistakes, right? You guys are doing things that you never knew, and it's good to do that, right? It's good to push them to the point where they're making mistakes because then they're getting better, right? A mistake is just an opportunity to learn. And how we as coaches deal with that mistake or deal with that failure is going to determine whether they continue on that improvement trail or not, right? So I talk about rinse and repeat, right? After a mistake, you got to rinse that off and go all the way back down and repeat that process, right? Put in more effort, set some effort goals, put in a little bit more work, reward that desired effort, recognize the unsuccessful effort. They're going to make a mistake. They got to have a mistake ritual to help them manage that mistake. I'll give you an example. Any Cal State Fullerton baseball fans?
Yes.
Ken Ravisa, who's also on our National Advisory Board of Positive Coaching Alliance, is a sports psychologist at Cal State Fullerton. And in 2004, they were about 15 and 16. They were about 500. And George Horton, who was the coach at the time, went in and said, Ken, my guys are deep in their head. They'd make an error and they'd throw it away. They'd strike out the first at-bat, they'd go 0 for 4. And we have guys like that too. They miss their first 3 shots and they go in the tank for the rest of the game, right? So Ken said, well, you got to get them to flush mistakes, right? So they would start talking to each other about flushing mistakes. Kid would boot a ground ball, they'd tell him to flush it. Kid would make a bad throw out in the field and he'd pretend he had a little handle on his belt and he would flush the mistake. And it started to get in their heads. And now the mistake is gone, right? I physically made a motion that made me forget that mistake and move on. Because Coach Krzyzewski always talks about the next play, right? He's got that next play mentality. We want them to only remember the part that teaches them and forget about the last play, right? Forget about the mistake and just go on. Missed shots are like that. Right? In 2002, I had a kid, Paul Porter, who was our area's player of the year. great shooter. And in our third or fourth game of the year, he was 1 for 11, and I had an assistant coach tell me, Paul's killing us. We got to get him out of here. The bottom line is he was taking good shots, and it looked good. And, he just had a bad night. And so we let him roll. We went 1 for 13 or whatever. And we lost to La Cañada in the semis of some tournament. And fast forward to March. Right? If you're playing in March, that's a good thing, right? So fast forward to March, and he had, our last 6 points against Artesia in the semifinals. Had 7 points in the finals at the pond. And I don't know if we would have won a CIF title and he would have had that good game if we would have put the rings on really, really early in the season, right? He had to have the freedom to let it fly a little bit. And that night he would look at me, and every time he'd take a shot and miss it, I'd tell him, and I'd give him 3 claps and a double fist bump. And that was my flush, but my mistake, I didn't tell him that's what that meant. Right? If I had told him, hey, when you look at me and I give you that one, baby, that means it's okay. I saw it. It's a good shot. Let it fly. Right? So it might have, gotten through to him a little bit. So come up with some sort of a sign or a symbol that tells kids, I saw the mistake. It's okay. Forget about it. Right? Throw it away. Brush it off. No sweat. Shake it off. Whatever. Right? And explain that to your kids. When I give you that one, that means, forget about it. There's not a sub coming to the table. Don't worry about it, right? And just continue to fight through it. So kids need to know that. How many of your kids look at you after a mistake? Yeah, right? What are they looking for? Approval, right? They want to know that it's okay, right? They want to know that you still have confidence in them. How many of them look at their parents? Yeah, more hands went up now, right? Yeah, they look at their parents. And they want the same thing, right? They want approval. They want to know that, mom and dad still love them. That, they have a ride home and they're going to eat tonight. Right? But parents can have that same thing in the stands, right? Because eventually we want them to play without looking, right? And just keep playing up and down and forget the mistake, right? So we've got to have a way to manage that mistake. Okay? You make a mistake, you have a mistake ritual, he looks at you, right? You throw a pass away, you tell him to flush it, you tell him to brush it off, right? You tell him to play with heart, whatever. Okay? And then, okay, I still got you. And you're going to keep playing. So you're going to manage that mistake a little bit. In the middle of that, maybe you have to re-instruct. Okay? Because really, in order to, what do we want to do from mistakes? Yeah, we want to learn from them. Okay? In order to learn from a mistake, what's the first thing you have to do? Yeah, you got to recognize it, okay? So as a coach, I got to tell you made a mistake, right? I got to let you know that you made a mistake. Then you've got to, get that reassurance. Then you need a little re-instruction. Maybe you did something wrong, you got to fix it, right? But the bottom line is you got to get ready for the next play, right? So you got to do all of those different things. That re-instruction could be something as simple as telling you to hold your follow through or see the defender, or where you should have been on the floor. Right? But you've got to have some re-instruction in there during that mistake management, and then you continue to stretch people, okay, and make them get a little bit better. Set stretch goals. Kids want to be stretched, okay? They want to be challenged. They want to be corrected. One of the early papers about coaching that I saw was called "What a Coach Can Teach a Teacher." So if you Google that, "What a Coach Can Teach a Teacher," it was done on John Wooden's last basketball team, and it categorized all of his acts of teaching. Right? How many times he scolded kids, how many times he praised them, right? How many times he taught them, and they came up with a ratio. And that ratio has been statistically proven in study after study, in business and school, in relationships. And that relationship between how many times I praise kids or teach them versus how many times I correct them has got to be 5 to 1. A kid's got to have 5 times as many positive memories as he does criticisms and corrections. And that's your whole culture. It's not just you, coach. It's the teammates and it's their parents in the stands too. Right? That's got to come to 5 to 1. Okay? What kind of things can you do as a coach to create a positive memory for a kid? Rattle them off. Compliment. So you're going to give him praise. That's truthful and specific. Right? Don't ever tell a kid he'd get a good job if he didn't. Right? That's more harm than it is good. Right? So truthful and specific praise. Right? Really like the way you held your follow through. That was a great block out, good stance, whatever it is. Okay? Truthful and specific praise. What else can you do to create a positive memory? Encourage them. I love that word, encourage. Right? It enables kids to have courage to try. Okay? What else? What are your kids going to remember? Yeah, you're going to clap. Right? The non-verbal. Right? You all have that look that, you know, they know when you're upset. You've got to have that look that lets them know when it's good. Right? The high fives. Right? Clean, you did a great job. Right? Way to go. So I gave him a high five. I used his name. I smiled. Right? I made eye contact. Right? That's 4. Now if I told him, hey, that was a great steal. I'd like you to use your left hand next time, but it was a great hustle. Right? Now that's 6 or 7 to 1. I got money in the bank. I can really get on it next time. Right? But it took me 3 extra seconds to give them a little bit extra love. Right? Or when they get to practice. Right? Start filling their tank then. Right? You're not mad at it yet. Okay? Let them know, hey, good job, way to go. And then, you know, we'll get after it a little bit later. Okay? So we want to get to 5 to 1. You could do a great job for 2 hours. And then the 5-minute ride home with mom and dad, that could be flashy. Right? And it could ruin all your good work. So you've got to get parents on board too. Right? You've got to let them know, hey, you know, we've got to establish this positive culture so that your kids can grow and get a little bit better. Okay? And then the last thing that we want you to think about, you know, Dennis mentioned sportsmanship. I think a good guideline for life or sports is what Positive Coaching Alliance uses as roots. Right? ROOTS. 5 things that you need to respect about sports. Okay? Or life. And you can, you know, take this outside the lines just as easily. And if you can learn these things from sports, it's great. First thing you got to learn to respect is the rules. Right? Don't bend the rules just in order to win. Dennis addressed that a little bit earlier when he talked about the cheating that goes on in tournaments. Right? Why would you bring somebody down just to win? Okay? Especially when you got kids in the stands that know that kid is older. Right? So respect the rules, on and off the court. Refuse to bend those rules. NBA is putting in the no flopping rule right now. Right? They're going to start to fine guys for flopping. I heard an official from Illinois talk about flopping, Dennis, and he said he watches the player's head, and if their head moves faster than their torso, that means they flopped. And I thought, wow, that's pretty good. Right? So if they, you know, get that thing, the LeBron James, right? They probably flop. I use LeBron, but Derek Fisher probably. Derek Fisher. Right? So if their head moves fast. But yeah, so refuse to bend the rules. Respect your opponents. I think that's the downfall of a lot of high school and really competitive sports. You think you've got to hate your rival, right, to get up for the game. Respect opponents, respect officials, even when you disagree, and it's okay to disagree. Right? Just recognize that 5 to 1, right, means you're going to get better performance out of your players, out of you know, your employees, out of spouses, right? Statistically proven. What do officials get? They get 5 to 1? Right? Maybe the other way, right? So think of ways where you can give an official a little bit of love, right, and get him, you know, a little bit of that 5 to 1. What are some things you could do for an official that would make him feel like you were on his side? Dennis, what do you think?
Hey, I think handshake before a game.
That's a start, right? I think Dennis talked about using their name, right? Instead of, you know, hey ref, okay? Your body language, your tone of voice, right? All of those things. If I stand next to him instead of facing him, right? Just that body language is non-confrontation, right? If he's there, you know, administrating a free throw and I'm standing next to him, that's a little bit different than if I, you know, go nose to nose with him. I think a lot of times if you coach your kids after a call, I think that lets officials know that you got his back a little bit, even if you disagree, right? Hey, you got to move your feet a little bit more and get in front of him, right? Instead of yelling. Or, you know, things of that nature, right? So you're coaching your kids instead of yelling at him. That became my mistake ritual, or my self-control routine. And I had an interesting relationship with officials, so we'll see how it goes down here in Orange County. But, you know, if I was upset or I disagreed with the call, first thing I tried to do is talk to my kids about what they needed to do next. Right? So go to coach mode and teach. Okay, get back on defense or you know, let's run this play, whatever the case may be. Okay? But talk to your kids first, and then go back to your officials. And by then, by halftime, you're over. Right? It's not as big a deal. So figure out a way to deal with officials. I think kids need to learn to respect their teammates. Okay? It's not only important that they get better individually, but they also got to be able to make their teammates better. So they have to learn to respect their teammates. And then the last thing in roots, right? We got rules, officials, opponents, and teammates. The last thing they need to learn is to respect themselves. How many of you guys have ever said, don't play down to the level of your opponent? Right? Play your best. I mean, yeah, you've all said it, right? Behavior should be the same way. Right? Don't lower yourself to that. Right? I know he's trash talking. Parents, I know that they're yelling. Okay? But that's not the way we do things here. Right? We're going to set high standards for ourselves and not lower our standards because the opponent is. Okay? So if kids learn through sports, they start playing when they're 5, right? And if they start learning to give their best all the time, regardless of what other people are doing or whether their opponents are doing, and behaving their best, regardless of what their peers are doing. I mean, when we're done with them and we send them away to college or you know, you send them away to high school, we've done a pretty good job, right? Besides teaching them to pass, dribble, and shoot, right? I mean, there probably isn't a better life lesson than to give your very best effort and behave in a manner that represents yourself to the best of your ability, right?